attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar titled Xsuite Cloud, Zero Trust Security for Your Infrastructure and AWS Management Console. We will begin our presentation shortly, but before we do, I'd like to go over a few logistics. We'll start off today with Xceedium's very own VP of Marketing, Mr. Patrick McBride. He will be giving a brief company and product overview, and then we'll be handing it over to Mr. Sean Hank, who is manager of the Systems Engineering Group here at Xceedium, and he will be doing a demo of Xsuite Cloud for AWS. I would also like to point out to you guys that we will be holding some space towards the end to answer any of your questions. So as we go along, please feel free to type your questions into the question box, and we'll make sure that we get to them. All right, so I hope you guys all enjoy our presentation today, and I'll hand it over to Patrick McBride. Patrick, whenever you're ready, let's get started.
Thank you, Nicole, and welcome everybody. This is actually the third running today. I feel like Sean and I are doing movies today because we had the opportunity this morning to talk with our colleagues and friends in Europe, and then we repeated our webinar in the midday for our North American colleagues, and we're really happy to be able to do the same this evening or your morning for our Asia Pac customers. So welcome aboard. I'm going to spend the next 20 or so minutes giving you a little background on Xceedium, taking you through the capabilities of our Xsuite platform, and then spending the bulk of the time talking to you about a new addition to or a new extension of that platform we call Xsuite Cloud. So without further ado, let me just jump right in. So Xceedium has been around a while. We're a software company that provides privilege, identity, and access management solution, and the key word in there is privilege. So from a market segment perspective, we play in the identity and access management space, but really as it pertains to only the privileged users or the privileged accounts. And so we're going to spend a fair amount of time talking through what some of those risks are. Our client base tends to be larger enterprise customers, so mid-size, large mid-market on up, say the Global 2000, and global government organizations. We've got both commercial and federal government customers around the world. We're a privately held company. Our headquarters is in Herndon, Virginia. We are broadcasting from there today. So if you guys get into the Washington, D.C. metro area, definitely let us know, and we'd love to entertain you at the offices, which are out near the Dulles Airport. And we're going to spend some time talking about our Xsuite platform. One of the things we like to note, in addition to some of the awards we have won, is that since we do have a nice size U.S. federal government client base, one of the things that we've had to do is spend a fair amount of time, energy, and actually money and resource in getting our products certified. So we're these are U.S. federal government certifications and requirements, things like the Common Criteria certification, where we're EAL4 Plus certified, which is a very high level. For the crypto capabilities in the product, we're FIPS 140 Level 2 product. And in the U.S. DoD, there's a set of tests that you have to go through to get on the Unified Command or the UC approved product list. So we're quite proud of those. And interestingly enough, those designations and certifications that are interesting or required, frankly, to do business with the U.S. federal government have come in pretty handy with government agencies around the world and some commercial companies around the globe who like the fact that we've had to put our product through that level of testing and those paces. So as we said, we've got kind of a split client base. The majority of our customers are commercial entities, but we also have a sizable federal government market both here and abroad. In Asia Pac as well. We have kind of what I would consider kind of the usual suspects when you're talking about companies that are providing security software. So we've got a sizable footprint in the commercial side in banking and financial services. So we've got kind of a marquee set of companies and organizations. We've got on some of the top global stock exchanges as customers. Very proud of that. We do quite a bit of business in the telecommunication, and that's grown for us quite rapidly globally. Probably our biggest growth this year has come from both traditional wire and newer wireless communications providers around the globe, including a sizable footprint in the Middle East now. We also provide a lot of product to energy or utility companies that have critical infrastructure to protect, so not surprising there. And one of the other areas that we've got a fairly deep presence is global retailers, mostly because of the PCI DSS standards that they have to meet for processing credit card payments and protecting the credit card data. So quite large enterprises in the retail segment as well. So that gives you a bit of a snapshot about what our customers look like and who they are and what segments. Again, not surprising, the kind of who's who list that you'd suspect, and certainly the market vertical market segments that you'd suspect. So what do we do at Xceedium? Our core goal is to protect enterprise customers from the risks that privileged users and by extension the accounts and the credentials that those privileged users use to access accounts. So we're protecting these from the risk that privileged users, and some of those risks or some of the bad things that can happen are again the usual suspects. Things like data breach or privacy breaches, which is particularly interesting and important in various areas around the globe. Obviously, privacy matters are pretty key in a lot of countries, more so outside of the United States than they are here domestically. Intellectual property theft or malicious destruction of servers, all that can come into play. The last bullet there with stolen credentials is we talk about privileged users, and we're going to split that up a little bit here, but very often people start to think about the systems, network, and database administrators that are their employees. And that's certainly one category of privileged users, and a very, very important one. Those employees can also be third parties, so contractors or outsourcers, even hardware, software vendors that are providing support, or managed service providers that are providing support. And so it's not just the employees that you hire and are on your payroll, it's other folks that you contract with to do work that need access to your critical infrastructure to do that work, and they need credentials very often, passwords and other tokens and other credentials to get access to those resources. So one of the risks there isn't just the privileged user, whether that's an internal employee or a third party, it's also the hackers that target those types of folks with all kinds of different attack vectors. So spear phishing attacks that may leave a keystroke logger on the system where you can pilfer the security credentials and passwords. It may be a social engineering attack rather than a very technical attack, calling up and getting access. That many of you read about the recent. There was a report, I believe, from CNET who had all of his devices basically wiped: his iPad, his iPod, and his MacBook Pro, including some important data to him. But that was just an example of a social engineering attack where they used information that they had and got Apple to change some passwords or change some IDs that they used to exploit. So it's not just that the employees that you have or the third parties that you've hired may go rogue and do something wrong. It's people may actively try to attack and get the credentials that they have so they can gain access. And at the bottom, so our primary goal is to provide security, mitigate that risk that those privileged users and accounts provide. But and the byproduct of that is enabling organizations to meet some of those strict security mandates that are out there. And we've listed some of them down there. There's lots of different ones in lots of jurisdictions. And one thing that's happening to many of them is that they're calling out this privilege account risk specifically and asking for controls. A lot of the discussions that we've had with chief information security officers over the last couple of months, as recently as yesterday with a top 10 bank in the U.S., was that auditors have become much, much more aggressive at looking at the controls that you're providing to protect against this particular risk and making sure that this is locked down. So let us start you off with just a bit of our philosophy, and simply stated, what we help organizations do is start with this idea of least privilege, which many people understand to be providing only the access and only the command, letting either a person or a system use only the commands that are required to do the particular task at hand, and providing no more privilege than that. And so we've taken that and added a couple of layers to that into something that we call zero trust. So that our philosophy is not just least privilege, a great starting point and something that well worthwhile looking up the Wikipedia definition of. It's a good starting point for how to think about dealing with this risk, but frankly doesn't go quite far enough in terms of the level of risk that these users and these accounts provide. So we take it one step further and go to the level of zero trust. And we'll tell you exactly what that means, or the kind of controls that we talk about putting in. So least privilege tends to be focused mostly around access control. We've added some things to that to get it to this level of zero trust. And let me give you a very kind of simplistic use case or use example of how this works. So in our scenario here, we've got a systems or network administrator that needs to get to, for example, a file server. They may be on, they may be at the company location on the network, or they may be coming in remotely. Either case, it would be the same. But in this scenario, we've got a user that has to get to a file server to do some maintenance on that file server. And so the first thing that we like to think about in the set of controls that together make up this idea of zero trust is that you need to first protect the passwords and credentials that they would use to access that account. So putting those in a vault, not storing them in a Excel spreadsheet or a Word document or some other text file that the administrators share amongst themselves that could get stolen or given to the wrong person, etc. So the first idea is to vault those credentials. That's the first key control. The next area is really taking steps to positively identify this specific user by name, so we know exactly who the person is, not just the IP address that they're coming in from, but exactly who they are. And Sean in the demo will take you through some of the different ways that we support multi-factor authentication so that we can do that and validate that. And we work with infrastructure that you already have in place, but that's the first step beyond the vaulting of passwords. Next, let me get back to our next step is really controlling access, and we actually take that a little further. We have this idea of a whitelist policy, and all of these controls that we're talking about in our product get controlled through a set of policies that you can apply to a group or an individual. But controlling access is one piece of it. In fact, we go one step further. We only provide visibility to the devices that an individual or a group of individuals is explicitly granted access or explicitly granted authorization to even see. So in this case, this very simplistic case we got here, this administrator, when they get to their Xsuite, we'll talk about this, their Xsuite access page, they'd only see one device. They would see this file server. They wouldn't even know that there was a database server or a set of application servers sitting on the same subnet, for example. The next step is to monitor what that user does during their session. Understand exactly what they're doing, log all those things and record those sessions, and then provide the ability to filter or use commands, a whitelist or blacklist methodology to filter what they do and block, in certain instances. So if they try to execute a command, and again, Sean will demo this, try to execute a command that they're not supposed to do, we can stop it, we can warn them, we can stop it, we can drop the session, we can do all kinds of interesting things. The next step is to prevent something that we call leapfrogging. It gets called lots of different things, but it's leapfrogging or RDP hopping, and that's the concept is simple. It's gaining access to one system and then using RDP, Telnet, SSH, et cetera, to go laterally in the network and jump onto other devices from a foothold that they already have on the network. So we can prevent that. And then the last piece is really attributing the identity of the user, even if they're using a shared account. So we know who this user is. We've positively identified them using strong authentication methods. Now, even if they're using a root account or an admin account on this file server, we know exactly who it was, what they did, and when they did it, and store all that information in logs. As this session is ongoing, if they try to violate a policy, as I already said, we can stop things, but we can also send an alert out into a log file and integrate that with your SIM or log management product. So these are the set of controls in totality that we group together and we think raised to the level of zero trust. It goes beyond just controlling access. As Ronald Reagan once famously said, in a speech of the U.S. president years ago, trust but verify. We actually take a different approach. We don't trust anybody, and we still verify that they're doing the things that they want us to do. And for these kinds of users who typically have what people often say is the keys to the kingdom, this ends up being pretty important. So let's take that, and so that's the capability, simple use case, but that's the capability that we say rises to zero trust, and that's a capability that we provide in our Xsuite platform. And so, as we sat back and looked at the market about a year ago, we clearly understood that people were doing a lot of data center consolidation, consolidating a lot of their technology into a virtualized infrastructure, moving things into private clouds in some instances, and in other instances, moving some parts of their infrastructure or building brand new applications up in public cloud. And the discussions that we had with our customer base said that they clearly wanted a single unified security management plane for making all that kind of access control work the same way across all of those environments. So the customer requirement was that regardless of where my particular server or network device lives, whether it's in my data center, whether it's in a private cloud provider's data center, whether it's up in the public cloud, we need to be able to enforce those set of controls and be able to manage those across a single unified plane, and then continuously monitor and alert across that plane. So I stole a Gartner slide here just to give you an idea of how they portray people moving into what we have been calling the new enterprise, this hybrid environment where people are using a combination of traditional data center and cloud and virtualization technologies together to deliver reduce costs for existing services or deliver brand new kinds of services that they weren't able to do before. So when we sat down and started really combing through who should we really try to partner with in this environment, one name really rose to the top of the list pretty quickly. I'm showing here a Gartner Magic Quadrant slide that shows the market leaders in the public cloud infrastructure as a service. So that's computing, storage, networking up in the cloud. So that whole IaaS, as it's often called, area. And we wanted to partner with somebody who was not only a market share leader, but really a thought leader, not just from providing a great compute and storage platform, but some guys who had really figured out a lot of the security issues and how to handle them. And so the Amazon Web Services guys were on the tip of all our customers' tongues when we asked who they were either doing business with or planning to do business with. That was a resounding effort. So we aggressively sought out that partnership. And what it led to earlier this year, we've been working, as I said, for about 12 months on this, but it led to a new product that we unveiled a couple of months ago called Xsuite Cloud for Amazon Web Services. And it's really an extension of the Xsuite platform. So it provides the same capabilities that we provided for our traditional data centers, but extends that capability up into cloud. And the way we package that is that new product is when you buy Xsuite now, you get all of the capability in the code base, and if you want to use the cloud capability, you just turn that on via license key. So it's, like I said, we're trying to extend the platform, provide additional capabilities for folks who are doing that kind of work, basically leverage their investment that they've already made in Xsuite and extend that. So what does that look like in practice? So here's our example environment that a lot of our enterprise customers are implementing. They've got instances of their computing infrastructure, servers living in a traditional data center, on a virtual platform in a private cloud, or up in the public cloud. And as I started to say, this new Xsuite Cloud product provides all the same controls that we just went through. So the access controls, the monitoring, recording, the credential vaulting capabilities. And it says credentials there on purpose, because when we look at cloud, we go from just standard username password combinations to some digital certificates and things like that Sean will take us through. So there's a new set of credentials that the administrator, sysadmin, database admin would need to have access to be able to administer those instances up in the cloud. So that was the baseline component of Xsuite Cloud, but we also added a capability. We've really extended security out to something called the AWS Management Console. So there's really a new concept of an additional kind of privileged user. So you've got the traditional database and network system administrators depicted in the upper left-hand corner here by the woman at her desk that is gaining access to different servers up in a public cloud instances or in the various different Amazon Web Services regions. They've got regions all around the globe, including a unique region for the U.S. federal government that's staffed only by folks in the U.S. so that U.S. nationals, so that they can meet some specific stringent requirements that our federal government has. But there's another account with this AWS Management Console account. Somebody can go into this account. They can delete instances. They can, with like a mouse click, and you'll see this in the demo. They can stand up, tens, hundreds, or even thousands of new instances. So we've got a situation where somebody that gains the credentials here can really wreak havoc on your infrastructure. They could add lots of servers and start costing you money right away. They could delete really important devices and cause you an outage right away. So particularly important account, and we've extended the security that the AWS team has already built into this, and we'll go into exactly what we've done there. The product, the Xsuite Cloud product, comes in two different form factors. So traditionally, we've sold Xsuite on an appliance. It's on a purpose-built, hardened appliance. You can turn on that Xsuite Cloud additional capability on the appliance and are able to manage across this hybrid environment that's depicted here, the traditional private and public infrastructure. Or you can implement an AMI, a virtual appliance that resides up on the Amazon EC2, their elastic compute infrastructure, the server in the sky. So we can run that AMI up on EC2, and you can protect either just your infrastructure that's running up in Amazon, or you can choose with some network configuration tricks to manage that infrastructure as well as your infrastructure living in your traditional data center or even a private cloud provider. So in either case, they can both manage your infrastructure no matter where it lives. One's a virtual appliance, one's a traditional hardened appliance. So this just summarizes what we've hit. With Xsuite Cloud, we provide the role-based and privileged access control, as well as single sign-on, which I didn't spend a lot of time on, but we can show you live, and has certainly some operational, very positive operational and ease-of-use implications. But we can do that across your enterprise system, across the AWS Management Console, and across instances running up in EC2. We'll show you how we can enforce separation of duties on the AWS Management Console. So, one person that's using that console may only have audit privileges. They can look and see what's being done, but can't do anything themselves. Other users that are using the console may have full privileges, and we can enforce that from Xsuite Cloud without having to add individuals and users and groups into the AWS management infrastructure. So we can take your traditional infrastructure and bridge up into the console and enforce the separation. So we provide the audit trails, protect the passwords and the keys that are used to access those capabilities in the cloud. And we still do the strong authentication and attribute the use. So we still know exactly, whether it's a database server running in your environment, in your data center, or up in the cloud, we still know who accessed it, what they did, when they did it specifically. We've done a deep level of integration, which will be very happy. It demos very well. Sean takes you through some really interesting things to show you some of the cool integration that we've done. With the AWS folks, kudos to them. They did a great job creating some really nice APIs that we could use kudos to our engineering and design team who figured out some really nice, unique ways to use that to make the job of managing in a very elastic environment where new servers come, old servers go quickly. You can fire up many new things. So we'll show you how we can do some pretty cool things there. And as we say, it's public sector ready, whether it's U.S. Government, federal government, or governments globally who like to know that that a product like this has been put through its paces. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sean to take us through his portion, take us through the demo. I'll be keeping an eye out for questions, and we'll stop Sean a little bit, during it to answer this for us. So let's go ahead and get that turned over to Sean, and we'll go from there.
Sean, you're all set.
Thanks a lot, Patrick. Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Pat, when we were talking, there were a couple of questions. One of the folks was having issues with their audio. Just so you know, this session is being recorded for later playback for participants. So if you are having issues with your audio, please realize that the session is being recorded and we can provide that for you. Just make sure that we have your contact information to do so. There was another question, Pat, that came in before I jump into the demo. That was asking about if there's a challenge around infrastructure as a service providers who offer these public cloud kind of capabilities, where they're providing the service, image creation and management of an instance, but they're not allowing access to the overall infrastructure itself. I answered the question privately to the person asking the question, but I think this bears a little bit of conversation from a perspective that if you are using a service provider and they're giving you access to maybe not their infrastructure through the form of a management console, but you have access to a desktop or a command line interface, you can still use Xsuite to provide some controls and protections around that environment. If you're getting maybe just say a service, access to a database, and there's some type of interface there, depending upon the use case, there is a possibility for us to still leverage Xsuite to provide some controls. It deserves some further conversation. More than willing to have that with you, but I wanted to make sure we at least address the questions.
Hey, Sean, let me add to that. If I could, let me add. When we spent a lot of time with these guys. In fact, we're just at a conference with the gentleman who runs security for all of AWS. So let me give you just a very quick perspective. The way they look at security, and a lot of not every provider's like this, but this is one, but a lot of them do, is they view their job, or they view security in a public cloud environment as a shared responsibility model. And so the way they look at it is they take it from the cement up through the hypervisor. That is, they provide the physical protections, so people can't physically get into their data centers or get to their infrastructure unless they're absolutely authorized to do it, and they very much limit that. And they control that the access, the system access up through the hypervisor layer. They expect their customers to add, for the hosted operating systems that live up in the cloud and the applications and services that are layered on top of those operating systems, they fully expect their customers to take on that part of the security burden. So that's just their perspective on it, but kind of a worthwhile way to think about it.
No, absolutely, and in most cases, whenever you're talking about the hybrid cloud environment, as we've been dealing with over the last year, there really is a demarcation point, just like there would be with standard telecom or wireless service, right? So the demarcation point typically is going to be to the image or to the service itself. Access is going to be provided by the service provider to that point. Anything you're doing to secure that channel beyond that is going to be above and beyond anything that the service provider is going to offer you. So hopefully we've answered that question. We want to make sure that if you do have more questions, we're going to be open and available to answer those throughout the rest of the demo. Pat will be keeping an eye out for questions to be raised. If you're not sure exactly how to ask a question, all you simply have to do is click on the little raise your hand there and type a question inside of the chat box. And we'll be looking for that. For those that may have joined late, my name is Sean Hank. Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, depending upon where you are at in the world. I want to welcome you to the webinar today. What we're going to do at this point is go through the actual user interface of the Xsuite platform. So if you're brand new to Xceedium, we're going to go ahead and show you everything that we've got. If you know Xceedium from past experience, we're going to show you everything we've got. So that being said, let's go ahead and get started. What you're looking at here is an interface that allows us access to specific ports and protocols to target devices, as we've provided the nomenclature now, based upon a restrictive access methodology that Patrick alluded to earlier. If you remember the slide where he walked through the various steps that lead up to access to the file server, one of the components in there was whitelisting services and devices. Not only are we controlling access, but we're also controlling visibility. And what do I mean by that? On this system, I have probably close to 30 devices, I'm going to guess, maybe right at 30, depending upon how many are turned on or turned off at any given point in time. I'm going to just do a refresh here so we can see. Yeah, I have 30 devices. And while 30 devices are actually configured inside of this enterprise environment, the reality of the situation is that the access policy that I have, or that any standard user has, is going to be limited, in this case, to 9. You're not ever going to give access to all devices in your infrastructure to all users. Obviously, smaller companies will have to rely on individuals or groups a little bit more than others, but the idea would be that you can, with Xsuite, actually provision access to resources based upon the user's role inside of the organization. And that role will dictate certain levels of access or permissions that are going to be required. So we can provision from resources such as Active Directory, Radius, LDAP. We can even provision from IAM resources now, like, for example, the AWS Identity and Access Management component that we've built some APIs into that we'll discuss shortly. So all this being said, I've been given access to the resource based upon an authenticated login that I've made, and that login gives me access to certain resources. Really key component to understand about our solution is that just because you authenticate does not necessarily mean that there's an access policy or the granting of access to resources. So again, a key differentiator here is that as I've logged in, normal login situation, once you're on the network, you have footprint. It's quite easy to connect to other resources, whether you're allowed to or not, just simply by the fact that you have a footprint or an IP address in that environment. Again, one of the unique capabilities of the Xsuite platform is that the end user, my remote desktop that you see here, that I'm operating from my MacBook, does not have direct access to any of these target servers that you see over these protocols. All of the connections are brokered through the appliance, virtual or physical, and as a result of that, since I never have any footprint on the network, I don't have to worry as much about things like malicious scanning or reconnaissance activities, malware propagation, and things like that. It's still a possibility, absolutely, over the targeted ports and protocols that we provide, but the threat landscape is reduced significantly because all of the traffic is being tunneled through this secure web session. So what does it look like? How does the platform work? All you really have to do is click on the particular port or protocol that you'd like to launch to the target device that you have in question. In this instance, you'll see that I'm actually going to connect to a domain controller. I'm going to increase the resolution of my display just slightly, and I'm going to go ahead and launch this session. One of the new features of the product is the ability for us to go ahead and provide access to the resources to map a drive. For those of you that are familiar with Xceedium, you know that we are pretty responsive to feedback that customers have when it comes to the solution, and one of the capabilities was the ability to actually map a drive. So from my MacBook, through the Xsuite interface, you'll notice that I've been able to actually map my actual entire hard drive. In this case, here's my local drive. Here is all of my folders related to my user account on my platform. Here's my Xceedium folder, and this is just showing one of my test machines that I'm running in parallels. So the idea of being able to actually map a drive from my user environment inside the MacBook Pro to the target resource environment through the appliance in a way that allows me to provide access to the resource without them having to log in or know a credential, and at the same time being able to track all the activity that takes place in that session is a pretty big deal. I'm going to go ahead and just for example explain some of the other capabilities that we have in the product. One of the features that we have is the ability to prevent unauthorized execution to connections to blacklisted hosts. So in this instance, what you're seeing is I'm actually going to try to make a connection to a downstream resource after making my initial RDP connection to this Windows 2003 server. When I make the connection or attempt to make the connection via the command line, command prompt interface, you'll notice that I have a customized warning message that appears telling me that the command I just executed against that target host is not authorized and is a policy violation. Similarly, I can do the same thing from any third-party client that's trying to gain access to an outside environment as well. Again, isolating the user to the environment in question. When I try to open this resource, again, you'll see that even over the SSH protocol, that access is been denied. Lastly, I'll show you what it looks like when you try to perform a nested RDP connection. Just by connecting here to another instance in my local enterprise. And now what's happened is we've actually hit an execution threshold or a policy violation threshold. And as a result of that threshold, again, you'll see the notice pop up here that says that the user has to contact the administrator because the threshold has been reached. If I wanted to reconnect, I could, but for purposes of the demonstration, I won't. So there you have it, logged in, no problem. I could actually log in a different way. Let me try to log into this remote desktop of a Microsoft SQL Server. Again, mapping the same drives. And here what you'll see is, again, the system is automatically providing the login credentials for me to access this particular machine. I don't have to know the password. Xsuite automatically manages the credentials, is managing my access to the resource. So I, as an end user, don't have to receive a password via email, a username via email. I don't have to worry about going to a text file or a spreadsheet or my notebook to remember what the username or the account password is for any particular resource in my environment. The other really neat thing about this is that we have the ability to do what we refer to as this punch-through single sign-on capability and gain access to the back-end target servers as well over separate ports and protocols. So in this particular instance, what I'm going to show is I'm accessing that same Microsoft SQL Server, but in this instance, I'm only allowing access to the Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio application that's installed on this resource. What's the difference? In this particular instance on this full-blown RDP desktop, you'll notice that I have access to the Start menu. I have access to the shared drives that I mounted earlier, right? I have access to execute any of the applications that are residing in this host, as opposed to this more structured environment where I'm only given access to the published application as defined by the access policy within Xsuite. I have no ability to do the right clicks. I have no ability to access the Start menu. I have no ability to do anything other than perform the work that I need to in this session. And notice, if you will, that in this environment, all of the sessions are being recorded, all the actions are being logged, audited, and monitored for forensics as well as for compliance and audit purposes. Okay? So again, want to make sure that everyone understands that without needing to know the password, access can be granted to the backend resource without a problem. Now, that being said, I'm going to show you one more thing, and then we're going to jump into some of the logging capabilities. I have here a Linux server that I'm going to connect to, and inside of this session that appears, you're going to see a couple different things. I'm actually going to connect to 2 different instances, and I'm going to do this for purposes of being able to show you what it looks like when I make a connection. All right, so here is my first instance connecting to a Linux-based resource. Notice, if you will, that when I logged into this resource and had the system log me in, again, we have a gentle built-in reminder that lets everyone know that the sessions are being actively recorded and monitored. All the keystrokes in this instance are being recorded as well. It's very subtle. It's not designed to be overbearing, but it is designed to make sure that individuals know that any of the actions that they perform in the role that they're assigned is subject to be audited, logged, and monitored. This particular username account is called Xsuite SSH. Again, the platform automatically provided a login to the resource with that username and the credential. I don't know what it is, and even if I did, if I tried to guess it, we have some password policies that automatically rotate based upon use, effectively giving me one-time use passwords as a result of accessing this system. I can perform, the simple commands, do an ls, kind of see where I'm at in the environment, navigate the directory structure as well, perform these commands in a way that gives me access to the environment for me to do my normal day-to-day jobs. Again, I don't have the ability to escalate privilege in this instance, because if I were to try to do that, let's say I wanted to try to escalate to sudo, what you'll notice here is that as soon as I type the command, I've been told that I've had a violation because for this particular server with this particular account over this particular protocol, access to that command has been denied. Similarly, if I were to try to do a service restart, let's say service network restart, right? I want to try to execute that command to restart the service. Maybe I needed to make a change to the IP configuration. I needed to restart it. Not having the ability to do that first because I don't have escalated privilege, but also not even being able to restart the service is a feature that we have here as well. Thirdly, I'm going to try to connect to a nested SSH session through this resource to another resource. Anybody that's ever worked in managed services or tried to do forensics in an environment where a single SSH console provided access to maybe 10, 20 other sessions inside of it can understand the difficulty it is to track back through all of that activity in the form of logs, who performed the command and where they tried to go. Being able to eliminate that capability is something that we have the ability to do within the platform. So again, after the 3 threshold violation, session has been terminated. Similarly, I'm going to launch another session. This time I'm going to actually log in with Oracle to an Oracle server running on Red Hat. And notice this time, if you will, that I actually have root access. I have the hash mark there that you can see, so I'm given root privilege. Just like I did before, I'm going to run through the same commands that I ran through before just to show you the difference. That was a non-privileged account that didn't have access. I already have root access. So I don't need to do this su or sudo commands. But similarly, if I were to try to execute an SSH connection, as soon as I try to do that inside of this SSH session I'm in, again, I increment violations. If I try to actually reboot with this administrator role that I have, you'll notice that there's a policy that prevents that execution of that command. And again, similarly, if I wanted to try to restart a service or something along those lines, I'll be kicked out of the session. Now, again, that was very fast, but the purpose here, because I know that we're coming up on the bottom of the hour, top of the hour, I should say, I'm going to just kind of roll through some of the other capabilities, and we still really haven't talked a lot about AWS, and I want to spend a good fair amount of time doing that. Notice, if you will, in the logs, logs are critical to any security product. The ability to capture the logs and report on who performs what activity is very, very important. Notice, if you will, that inside of the Xsuite log system that you see here, all of the activity, regardless of the system that I connect to. Here you'll see all the log entries for the domain controller. Here you'll see all the log entries for the SQL server, the multiple sessions I was in, as well as the Oracle server and the Linux server that I connected to. All of these sessions really are here to provide you with the ability to understand that regardless of the system that I connected to, regardless of the account that was used to connect to them, all of the activity was tracked back to a singular user ID. Whether this is a local account, a domain account, maybe it is an account that's used with a smart card through certificate-based authentication, which is supported by the Xsuite platform. Really, all of that can be correlated before ever being sent to a SIM tool, before ever being sent to a log management tool, and by cleaning up the source information that's presented to those systems, we're actually able to allow those platforms to perform more efficiently. And so, again, just the idea here that I can correlate user activity regardless of the target system and the account that's used is also a very key thing. Let me jump in here and show you exactly what the session recording looks like. So here you'll see a violation. Again, providing the date timestamp, the user that actually had the violation that was logged, the transaction classification, in this case, violation, the resource that was connected to, and then you'll see here that access was blocked. If I actually click on the view recording link that we provide, I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel here because I'm not using my certificate-based authentication component. What you're going to see is the actual playback of the session. Okay. Now, in this instance, what I've done is I've paused it here so I can spend a few moments with you just describing the capability. Again, I can come back here and click on playback, double-click on any one of the events that are shown here to actually give me the ability to see inside of the session what the command actually was that was being executed. Yes, we sent this to syslog. Yes, we sent this to your SIM tool. Yes, if there was a violation, we created the alert. We created an SNMP flag. We also sent an email if so configured. But the idea of being able to go above and beyond what the syslog does and actually get a visual representation of what happened in that session in complete context with the end user activity is something that very few products can provide on the market today. And to do that in a way that manages the ability to take care of local resources as well as the cloud-based resources, which I'll show you in a minute, is something that we feel is very unique in the marketplace today. Notice, if you will, in the upper left-hand corner again, the user ID of the person performing the actions. This particular session is only about 2 minutes and 11 seconds long. I'm going to let it continue to play in the background, but one of the things I'd like to draw your attention to is that even with the high resolution screen grab that we performed here, we're actually capturing this 2-minute and 11-second video recording in only about 690.5 kilobytes worth of storage space. What this means to you in simple terms is that with the agentless recording capability that we have, meaning I do not have to have any kind of software agent installed on the target machine to perform this recording function, I'm able to capture all of the mouse clicks, all of the session files, all of the windows that open and close, etc., provide some metadata in regards to the violations or files that are copied and pasted inside of this session, and do so in a manner that allows me to use very little storage space. Other solutions that are agent-based or are capturing JPEG images and stitching together as real files, understand that this is a full 30 frames per second screen grab that we're doing that allows us to do it in such a way to take very little storage hit or a tax on the storage requirement for deploying the Xceedium solution. Okay, I'll let this play out. Again, notice if you will in the timeline we do have the little tick marks here that actually mimic or copy the information that's provided inside of the event list on the left. Again, just kind of capturing the information and providing it for playback. I actually have samples where we've done 4-hour recordings and the file sizes maybe have been 40 meg. If you ever watched a 2-hour movie online, or you streamed a movie, or you watched a Blu-ray video, a Blu-ray disc is about 8 gigs worth of storage, you'll realize that the ability for us to capture such high frame rate session recording files for forensics analysis and for use for training and such is done in a way that really is a mind bender and really is one of the unique features of the Xsuite solution. I have some other situations here that we could go into, but I thought what I would do is spend a little bit of time just kind of going over a couple of the other sessions that we've got and other creations or other sources that I've actually put into the product. So what I'm going to do is actually log back into my local instance. Give me just 1 second to do that. Pat, while I log back in here, have any questions rolled through yet? I want to make sure that we.
Yeah, there's actually there is one queued up, Sean. That when you get into the session, I think on your access page on the where you had Xsuite installed, was the hardware hardened appliance version of it. I think one of the things that showed up was the MySQL Management Studio page, and so the question was, can we get a list out that talked about the applications, those types of applications that we can control, which I've answered, said we could, but maybe you can talk a little bit more broadly about it, and I think you usually weave this into your demo as well, the difference between the overall session versus, so if you want to even show that in the cloud side of things, that's fine.
Okay, yeah, I'll do that. There is a list. We do have a data sheet that lists all of the supported applications that we're using for session recording. Essentially, any thick client application that's installed on the desktop has the ability to be connected to through a feature that we call our lightweight RDP application publishing. So whether it's Firefox, whether it's in this case, MySQL Server Management Studio, whether it's Internet Explorer because you have a web-based application and you want to limit access to that. Really, and so long as you can provide the path to the Windows system, provide that as under the service technology or service section of the interface, associate that to one of the devices of the system, and then create a policy around what users can access that device. It's as simple as that, really. But I can't show that. Speaking of the cloud, I want to show a couple of bits of integration that we've done there. Up to this point, I've really talked a lot about our enterprise environment, and you can see that here easily without any kind of an issue. One of the things that we did to integrate the capability was actually bridge from the enterprise. As Patrick mentioned, he talked about supporting hybrid environments where customers are using enterprise-based resources in a data center or in their headquarters building. Also want to leverage at the same time access to resources that they have in the cloud. Xsuite actually is able to bridge that gap from a single appliance perspective, giving the ability to access not only the local resource that's on the premise, but also giving access to the resource that's here in the cloud. And so how does that work? Well, it's really quite simple. You simply just access the Xsuite platform, assuming that the user has the role to gain access to the AWS console. You'll see here that the console is presented. The interesting thing about how we actually do this is we take advantage of Amazon's Secure Token Service API. The way that we've integrated this is that I can actually map a local user or a domain user and not actually have to create an account inside of the IAM infrastructure, but take advantage of the Secure Token Service that Amazon provides to give the user a temporary credential while they are accessing this environment. So how does that work? It's simple. You simply log in with your username and your password or your token into the Xsuite platform. If the access policy says that you'll have access to the Management Console, all you simply do is click Management Console and you're connected. Now notice, if you will, that the connection that I'm using, the account that I'm using, shows right here. Sean at, and then there's a long numerical string that's provided. You can see here that this is a federated account, meaning that I am actually connecting to the Xsuite through the Xsuite console to AWS with an IAM account, but that account, in this case Sean at this long numerical string, isn't actually listed inside of the IAM users list that you would typically find. What does this mean to you? It means that you can provide access through temporary secure token services that Amazon provides through their API, but associate that access to the cloud resource to the local Xsuite credential and account that was used when they initially logged in. We're providing the means to do one person, one account, federated access to a backend resource, and tracking that user activity, whether they're, again, on-premise or accessing a cloud-based resource. This is really huge when you think about it, because I no longer have to manage 2 or 3 user repositories for the different cloud services that are supported. All I really need to do is have an initial repository supported through the Xsuite platform, and we take care of the back-end heavy lifting for you. So a really unique feature that we provide in that regard. Notice again, if you will, that the session is in fact being recorded. So anything I do inside of this environment is being logged, audited, and monitored. There are different role-based access controls that Amazon provides inside of their IAM infrastructure. While this loads up here, what you're going to notice is that we can actually define roles. Here you'll see I've got an administrative role as well as a read-only role. If I actually click on the admin role here and bring up the permissions, what you're going to see is that I can actually add additional permissions capability inside of the environment. As I drag this down here to show you, I'm going to add another policy here just so you can kind of see what's going on. So you'll see out of the box templates that are provided by Amazon: administrative access, power user access, read-only access. Maybe I want access only to a specific service. Let's say, for example, where is the S3 service? I think it's down here at the bottom of the list. There it is, S3 read-only access. Maybe I want to give a user access to S3, but I only want to give them read-only access. Here's the JSON policy that allows us to apply this. I simply click on Apply at this point, and now the administrator, in addition to having the administrative role, also has the S3 role attached as well. Inside of the inside of the Xsuite interface for our Amazon console, what we can do is map that policy back simply by coming under Policy, Manage Policies, and then we can actually see what policies have actually been imported into AWS or from AWS. Okay, and in this case, I've imported the administrator policy as well as the power user policy. All right, so very easy to be able to either create an AWS policy inside of the Xsuite platform, leveraging the JSON capability, and synchronize that back to the IAM capability over the integration that we provided, or import to Xsuite the AWS policies as well. Now, that's one level of integration. Second level of integration that we've done is the ability to do auto provisioning or auto import of devices inside of AWS. How exactly does that work? Well, I'll go ahead and show you that. Let me pop back over here to the EC2 console. For those of you that are not familiar, I understand we've got folks all over the world on the call tonight. Thank you for being with us. Just want to make sure that if you're not familiar with Amazon as far as their web services capability goes, don't worry. They offer a bunch of good training online and online documentation to get you up to speed really fast. So what I'm going to do here is go ahead and launch an instance. I already have, as I said, 30 plus some odd devices in my environment, but I'm going to launch a couple more here to show you how we can actually provision users to existing devices and device groups. I'm going to click on Continue here so I can just use the wizard. When I do that, you'll see I have a whole list of different images that I can launch inside of the AWS infrastructure. I'm going to just use the Amazon Linux machine image here just for ease of use, and I'm going to launch 7 instances. Actually, why don't I launch, yeah, 7 is fine. 7 will be good. We have multiple different sizes. This is another question that's come up quite frequently for us. Does the Xsuite Omni instance provide the ability to support all of the different Amazon Web Services size and capacity for all the different levels that they provide? The instance types that you see here are all fully supported by the Xsuite Omni image. We've worked very hard over the last 12 months with Amazon to make sure that our code base, our application, the underlying operating system all works very well with the existing instance types that you see here. And as a result of that integration, we've actually enabled Amazon Web Services to provide some additional capability above and beyond what they were providing before. So I can apply this as the free tier layer if you wanted to play around with it, let's say, for 2 elastic computing units, which is similar to, let's say, 2 processors operating out of 1 core and giving you 613 megs of RAM, all the way up to getting 35 processors over 8 cores and getting 60 gigs of RAM, fully supported inside of the Amazon instance. All right, so no issues there. I'm not going to worry about any of the availability zones here. Again, we can support all the different regions that Amazon provides the world over, as well as supporting the different zones inside of each of the various regions. Our code inside of our appliance has the ability to support built-in clustering and load balancing. So when you combine this active-active capability that we provide for high availability within the Xsuite software itself, and you combine that with the physical instance availability across multiple regions and zones inside of AWS, you really have a stellar solution at being able to provide high availability, high fault tolerant, highly elastic cloud-based solution that you can use to control all of the resources in the cloud. I'm going to go ahead and just click continue here. All of access that's provided inside of AWS is done via key pairs. I'm going to actually call this a web demo here. I'm actually going to provide an additional tag. What this tag is going to do for me is allow me to go ahead and import this particular list of 7 instances that I'm launching to a specific group that I've created called Webinar Example. Now, what this means when I do this, it means that not only am I auto-provisioning the devices, meaning I'm going to turn these on, activate them on my network, have them be part of my overall infrastructure, I'm also going to automatically apply an access policy that's pre-existing inside of the environment. So while the system is turning that on, and again, I've done all of this inside of the session so we know it's being recorded, I'm going to pop back over here and go to the devices. If I go to the Manage Devices list here, what you're going to see is, again, as soon as this loads up here, it's a little slow. I've got 30 total devices. What I should see when I hit this refresh button is I should now see 36 total devices being fired up. One of them has not yet made it into the system, but here you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, plus the one that previously existed. If I come back up here and I hit refresh one more time, we'll probably see that last one pop in there very nicely. And if not, it might take a moment or two for that to happen. So here are those devices, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, plus my web demo, my existing one. All those are there. If I go to my actual access policy page now and I want to view those resources, I go to the web demo group that I've created. Here you see they are, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them. If I want to connect to it, all I simply do is just click on the SSH button. Clicking on that button will automatically launch the SSH session for me. And as a result of that session launching again, all I've done is turn them on inside of the AWS infrastructure. Haven't really done anything else besides that. And now you can see I have all of the capability to execute the commands. All of the existing policies that are inside of that environment still apply. I've done nothing here except turn on the instances, and everything else has been imported automatically. So being able to auto-provision existing access policies, being able to auto-provision existing controls inside of the Xsuite instance for any cloud-based resource is completely possible. And the fact that with Amazon you pay for the use, as soon as you're done using the session, as soon as you're complete with the level of computing power that you need inside of that environment, it's really quite easy to come back in here inside of the instances page to go ahead and turn off those instances and have them no longer be available. So in this instance here you see all of these web demo boxes. I'm just going to come in here and turn them off. And when I do this, there's one that I missed. There it is. I'm just going to go ahead and say terminate. That will log them all off, shut them all off. I've completed my task, and again, all of that is going to be terminated. So again, having the ability to come in here and provide that capability is pretty awesome. Now, again, everything is being logged, audited, monitored, and recorded. So in addition to me performing all the activity on the device, here you'll see that here are all the Amazon instances being spun up and added to the group.
Hey,
Here
Sean.
you'll see, oh, yeah, Patrick, go ahead.
So yeah, this is a pretty good time. There's a couple questions here. A couple have to do with logs. So as you're showing that, one of the things that the questions can we use some of the settings to pipe those logs to a log management solution, say for near real-time access in the SIM or log management solution? And a related question is, do we have any normalized filters that we're already providing for piping those to the SIMs, like Q1, Nitro, ArcSight, et cetera?
You know what? It's a great question. We've been asked several times by a lot of customers, are you providing normalized log data out of your appliance? And I'm going to answer this question from a perspective of my MSSP background. I was an MSSP, worked with ArcSight, worked with Nitro Security, worked with Q1 Labs, worked with RSA and Vision, so I can answer this in a pretty easy way. With all of that experience over the last 8 years that I worked in that space, we do not provide any type of formal or vendor-specific formatted log data. And the reason why is we're a security company. We focus on that bit of the product, but we leave it up to the experts in their relative fields to be able to create the parsers that are necessary to extract the data that they're looking for their customer base. Now, that being said, we have been approached by ArcSight, we have been approached by Nitro Security, we have been approached by other vendors, to work on creating the ability to create specialized formats for those feeds. So, for example, ArcSight Ceph format we're looking into being able to support that capability. So, to provide in a normalized output from our appliance is something we're looking at. That being said, because we don't have that, we're providing standard syslog. It really allows customers and the vendors inside the log management or SIM space the ability to, create the parsers themselves, provide a little bit of value add to the organization, and be able to extract the information that they're looking for. So I think that in order to appease the masses, leveraging the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, we get 80% of all of these logs, again, because they're already correlated based upon activity. They've already been classified with some type of transaction data. It makes it very easy to create a correlated log rule or an alert inside of the solution of choice that's being used to raise the appropriate flags to the security personnel to start an investigation.
Yeah, and if you could, so the related question there, Sean, if we could see how that is, how you can pipe that out, and I guess another related one is where are those things stored? And including the recordings.
Yeah, so great question. So the logs are actually stored on the appliance, and we have the option, the built-in facility, to actually enable logs to be forwarded up to 2 different log destinations. Now, this isn't a play on Amazon at all, but I will just say that Amazon has their AWS market, right? Their capability, their marketplace, as they call it. I don't know exactly where it's at. Oh, there it is, just past it, where the likes of Splunk, the likes of other software or service providers have the ability to come in here. So you can actually come in here and get a syslog NG server. If you wanted to get a Splunk server and you wanted to get that set up and be part of your infrastructure, you could do that really easy. If you wanted the ability to come in here and just basically create any kind of a software capability to leverage inside of your environment, you could do so through AWS. So what we're going to do is we're going to just stream the syslog data to any remote server that you've got. If you're leveraging AWS as a collection point for that, you can go ahead and do this. So we store the logs on the box. We also forward logs up to two different destinations into any type of log collector that you have that's going to support syslog. We also have the ability to back up these logs into an S3 instance. So for that to happen, again, we simply just come down here on the logs page that I'm at. You'll see in addition to the existing NFS and sysmount, we have the ability to actually log all the traffic into an Amazon S3 bucket. Now, Amazon, on the one hand, really loves the fact that we have our appliance there and that we can scale to support, up to 65 ECUs with 8 cores and 60 gigs of RAM, because that means for them the pay per use or the pay per minute on that is quite high. The downside is that when you're recording sessions, the fact that our session recording files are so small, what you end up with is the realization that you're paying really pennies for the storage inside of the AWS environment for our log recordings. To that end, we actually tell you the size of our session recording files here inside of the listing. Again, in some of the sessions that you'll see, they get up to like 3 meg. This one that I've been running for about 10 or 12 minutes is up in the area of 5.2 meg. Anything that's shown in red is an indicator that there's been a policy violation either on the command line side or the graphical recording side. So again, having the ability to store them locally or remotely is possible with the solution. Again, locally in your enterprise, remotely to a third-party log store, or even storing everything inside of S3. I know we're getting a little bit past the top of the hour here, but I just wanted to show kind of the last little bit to give you an idea. Again, I've been connecting and running this inside of an instance that's running inside of my local perimeter here inside of Herndon. What I have not shown you is the ability that we've got to actually integrate this with our Amazon instances. And so what I'm going to do is actually show you the running instances that I have. You'll notice one of them here is called Xsuite 2.1. This is an actual Amazon machine image that's running inside of AWS, inside of their elastic computing environment, that I can actually connect to and access. As I highlight this and I move this up here, I'm just going to show this to you first to give you an understanding of how it works. I've associated a public-facing, what they call an elastic IP, to this source AMI instance that I can connect to over the web at this IP address. And so what I'm going to do is actually disconnect completely from this local resource here by logging off. And I'm going to actually connect to this Amazon machine image that's out in the cloud. Okay. All I simply do is log into that IP address. If I was using domain name resolution, I could do that as well. Notice, if you will, I'm logging in with a completely different username and a password. I'm going to go ahead and log in. Most of the interface is going to look very similar. There are a couple small design cues that we've done to make this slightly different. But for purposes of what we're talking about today, this is an instance of the Xsuite appliance running autonomously inside of the AWS environment. We do support certificate-based authentication, as you can see here, attempting to log in with that. The visual indicator here that this is an AMI instance is a little orange cloud that you see. In my particular case, inside of this AMI instance, I'm going to go ahead and actually let me get this out of the way here. I've got some software running in the background. Apologize for that. But what I'm going to do is come over here to the logs, go back to the configuration of the logs page here, and what you'll notice inside of this instance is that instead of recording to NFS or CIFS, I'm actually recording to the S3. Here you'll see the Xsuite SSH recordings. If I come back over here and I want to go over to the S3 bucket, it's simply just a matter of navigating to it. Once the S3 dashboard comes up, you'll see I have multiple buckets listed. And if I actually click on the Xsuite recordings here, you'll see the list with the date time stamps. Okay. Now I'm going to go back to the session that I was in earlier here, and I'm actually going to go back to the administrative interface because, again, having the ability to play these sessions back is really, really important. So whether you're playing them back over the cloud, whether you're playing them back inside of the environment, being able to access cloud-based resources from the local perimeter, it really doesn't make a difference where the Xsuite appliance is at. You can take advantages of the economies of scale that AWS's infrastructure provides for you. If you're more comfortable with leaving an appliance on site but providing bridged access into the cloud-based resource, we support that capability as well.
Hey, Sean.
So I don't know if there are any other questions, but I wanted to make sure that we provide the last few minutes for that. So go ahead, Pat.
Yeah, a couple here. So some good questions. So what's the connection and protocol into AWS from? Presumably that's a scenario with Xsuite running on-prem, and you're connecting back into infrastructure running in AWS.
It's everything is tunneled through either a VPN connection. It really depends. So if you're connecting inside of the public infrastructure, the EC2 infrastructure, where things are just out on the internet, it'll be any port and protocol that you define for the target resource. So it could be RDP, it could be SSH, it could be Telnet. If it's a web server and you wanted to set up a secure tunnel over SSL, you could do that. So it's going to depend. If you're leveraging their what they call their virtual private cloud computing capability, this is a separate service that they offer inside of their cloud infrastructure, which really gives you private IP address space inside of the public infrastructure that's not publicly available. And to access those resources, you typically need some type of VPN termination point or internet gateway to be able to access those private IP resources that exist in the cloud. As far as how Xsuite connects to the AWS infrastructure, everything is done over 443. all of the protocol communications that go back and forth, the API calls that are made, all that takes place over a secure tunnel back into the AWS environment.
So let me scrolling through. I think we've hit all of the excellent questions that we've gotten. So
yeah, I'm going to do one more thing, Pat. I'm going to log back into my local instance because the one thing I did not show, at least I don't believe I showed it to its complete extent, was how we're actually able to connect to the cloud-based resources from inside of an on-premise deployment like we're showing here. So again, I don't have a network diagram, unfortunately, folks. The next time we do this, we'll take one of the lessons learned is to be able to provide some type of diagram that gives you an idea of how this infrastructure is set up. But what you'll see here is when I go to the access page, we have this ability to create these views based upon the different types of resources that you have access to. I have my public cloud resources that are enabled here. Again, from my on-premise location, accessing over RDP, accessing over SSH, I have the ability to connect to these cloud-based resources over particular port and protocol through the Xsuite appliance. So it's not going out RDP over the web, but it's actually being tunneled over a secure SSL encrypted session between the Xsuite appliance and the Amazon Web Services environment, and I'm then able to go ahead and perform all the activity that I need to while I record all the traffic, either again locally in my data center or inside of the S3 instance inside of Amazon.
I'm looking to see if anything else comes up, and I think we've hit most of them. If we've got any final ones, we'll take those now. So I'll take a breath here and see if we get any more that come up. Again, any other questions that you might have, we'd be delighted to find some time to speak with you directly and answer any specific questions that you didn't want to ask here, or as you go and think about this, I'm sure other kinds of questions will come up. We'd be happy to field those for you. You're certainly we've got some great partners in our global regions. So we've got a lot of folks from Asia Pac on tonight. We've got some wonderful partners there that we can reach back to, and we would be happy to put you in touch with them and in your local geography. And if not, you can certainly hit our webpage, hit the Contact Us page, and we'll answer any of those. So if any other ones come in here right at the end, we'll get an email
Pat, there was
back.
one more that came through right at the end from
Right.
over in Singapore, and it was, will we have the ability to extend beyond AWS as far as, tie in other web services with other infrastructure as a service provider?
Yeah.
So I wasn't sure if you saw that question pop in. I just happened to see that from our fine friends over in Singapore, and I wasn't sure if you wanted to answer that or if you wanted me to try to take a stab at that.
No, I can hit that. So the answer is, today we're absolutely focused on working with the Amazon folks. They've been a fantastic partner. They've got a great service, and we're really looking to make sure that we do everything. We've got some really additional enhancements in line for that environment. And the simple answer is we're really pretty much customer driven. As a lot of folks are. So I would expect absolutely to see additional announcements supporting other cloud platforms and other service providers. For the time being, we're focused on making our Xsuite Cloud for AWS absolutely the best it can be, and we'll run through some iterations of that while we watch this market develop. And it's going to develop differently in different geographies. So we're keeping a very, very close eye on that. I would absolutely expect that we'll and certainly have talked to other very notable cloud providers, but we've got nothing to say yet, but I would say stay tuned. All right, well, it looks like we've come to the end of an excellent, again, another excellent Sean demo and some fantastic questions, so thanks for sending those in. It's much better when we get those questions, makes it keeps us on our toes, makes it more lively, and so we really appreciate you being on today. We look forward to talking to you shortly. Certainly, if you have any follow-up questions, we'll be happy to answer those. So hit us up on our website, hit the Contact Us page, and we'll get right back to you. Have a fantastic day, and we will look to see you on our next webinar, or hopefully in person sometime. And that offer stands if you get into the Washington D.C. area, certainly make sure that we know you're coming in, and we'd be happy to sit down with you in our headquarters office. Take care.